So as it turns out, most of you on my channel really like machine guns, particularly big machine guns. And luckily for you, when I was a guerrilla fighter in Iraq, I spent about 1 month going deep and dark into our tunnel cave system of bunkers and bases and getting into a classroom where I would spend all day learning about pretty much every 50 cal machine gun and above. Okay, so I learned about the Dushka, the KPV, ZU-23, the Zeus, the Browning. For some reason in the Marine Corps, I never even seen a Browning, but as soon as I get to Iraq, I'm using it. And it wasn't just learning about them. I fired every single one of them. I know how to disassemble and reassemble every single one of those blindfolded. Did it many times. I could still do it right now, probably. Except for the ZU-23. It's like 48 parts, including the bolt assembly. You have to like use a hammer and this wooden mallet, and oh, it's awful. Trust me. Not only that, but I also, because I was in a Kurdish militia, I learned about the different anti-material rifles like the Chia and Zagros. Forgotten Weapons actually talked about them. I'm gonna be ranking them, telling you my experiences with each of them. I don't know anybody else with this particular set of skills. Okay, which is really weird. I'm not kissing my own ass. Let's get into the first one you all want to know about, the Dushka. So yeah, the Dushka, not a huge fan. When it works, but it doesn't work much, at least in my experience. So the biggest problems, the biggest downsides, I'll start with that because I just very critical of the Dushka after my experience with it. It jams a lot. The extractor breaks like crazy. This is very common on all machine guns. The extractor is like this claw. When you fire it, it brings back the bolt, boom, and it slams forward and it's a claw and it grabs onto it. It could be from the ammunition. The ammunition is really shit. It's all rusty and we have to clean out with diesel. And we don't want to crack open a new box of freshly made Russian ammunition because as soon as you open up that box, it's going to be exposed to the elements. But I think the biggest problem, honestly, this is just obvious. If you keep a machine gun or any weapon out in the elements, Dushkas are always out in the elements. It's on top of a tank. It's on a tripod like we would use. It's exposed to the weather of Iraq, which gets to like 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it drops down a month later into blizzard conditions. The extractor and the metal of these machine guns and the fine tuning of the mechanical process of this thing can just get destroyed. That's the biggest problem we had. The weather, I think, and the ammunition. I was the Dushka gunner, alright? So that's the team leader's job a lot of times when you're up in the cave systems, and I was the team leader. And yeah, every like twice a week, we would bring it back. I would scrub it down with a toothbrush and diesel, get off the rust, bring it out there again. And where you're storing this is in a bunker. They're really well hidden, but we're still outside technically. We're underneath a mountain. Snow gets in, rain gets in. And every time you put it out there, you don't just let the Dushka stay out. We would wrap it in saran wrap, get some tape on it. After that, you put some this blanket. So you get a blanket and you tape the blanket on top. That way it like protects from like any falling rocks to break the saran wrap and let the condensation get in. You have to put a blanket on top, wrap that, tape it. And then after that, you put this potato sack that we use as camouflage and you spray paint in. That's how you store those things. And every 3 days, you have to tear it all off, go back. You need a lot of saran wrap is what I'm saying. You know, wear and tear happens. The tripod, it's a Russian tripod. It's really, really nice. A lot of Russian weapons work this way where in order to rack it back or in order to use a certain part, like the gas tube on a PKM, which I talked about, made a whole video about the PKM. When you want to rack back the Dushka, you get a bullet or a casing of that 50 cal ammunition. You sort of put it on this lip, it gets locked into place and you rack it back. And the tripod has this thing that you can pull and you just pull it back and it makes it a lot easier to put in a bullet into the chamber. Well, it's an open bolt, so I guess not really in the chamber yet. But yeah, the biggest problems we had with the Dushka was the extractor breaks, and what happens is you can only fire once. And once you fire once, it stops firing. I can't really say anything nice about the Dushka. We had to break 2 times, all right? 2 times in like 6 months. Not a big fan of the Dushka, really not. I would overall rate it like a D, all right? It's my personal opinion. I'm sure there's better Dushkas out there, I'm not, okay. Going on, KPV. KPV is a 14.5 millimeter, slightly more range, slightly more power than the 50 cal 12.7 millimeter Dushka. The KPV is my favorite, hands down. It's S tier. Its capabilities, it's about the same fire rate as a Dushka. It's about the same everything except for what it looks like. It's literally a giant tube, and the way you reassemble and disassemble is insane. So you have to put it upright, which is like almost the size of me. And if I stand up, the KPV is gonna be like up to my chest. Once you have it up, inside this giant tube is this spring. So when you disassemble it, you bring it the spring that's like 1.5 meters long and this thick. And you take that off, and then you put it to the side, and then you continue. There's a lot of weird parts. You can clearly see that the designers of the KPV, which I believe was made in Russia, maybe Soviet bloc country, but you can tell that it was not the same designer of the Dushka. The Dushka is very simple. It's very just normal weapon, pretty straightforward. KPV, no. And the biggest problem with the KPV is the muzzle device, which we'll get into. But everything else is fairly simple. You can disassemble and reassemble this thing in like 2 minutes. 17 seconds was my fastest time. Blindfold was like 8 minutes, but I was the fastest. For some reason, I like the KPV. To fire it, okay? This is where I'm gonna start getting into the bunkers a little bit. The way we do it in the guerrilla world is you fire every weapon you have, yak, one by one. I know, it's the machine gunner's like worst enemy, but look, the ammunition sucks. You don't have much of it anyway. you might as well just accurately take some shots with a big bolt. We would not fire it automatically. And especially in the bunkers, it's usually just a slit. So from outside, you can't tell that all of Shengal is covered in these bunkers with Dushkas and ZU-23s pointing at you. Because it's just this tiny little slit. But guess what? You don't stick the barrel outside the slit. If you do, they're going to see you. So you keep the barrel inside, and you're shooting through this tiny slit in this bunker, in this underground tunnel system. And the KPV, you have to fire it like this. You pull back this thing. I don't know. It was made of rebar. I don't know if that's the proper way, but that's how the Kurds did it. It's probably meant to be on a vehicle. That's probably why. But we would attach it to a homemade tripod. Sometimes it's remote controlled too. You have to fire it through there. You have to do yak. If you do 2 shots in the KPV, the tripod, it's makeshift. And if you fire it and it hits the wall in front of you, you're gonna be blind. You maybe even die. That's a 14.5 millimeter bullet blowing up in your bunker. You gotta be very, very careful. And yeah, the muzzle device. I promised I was gonna tell you the story of that. It takes about an hour to go and install, at least in my experience. There's a lot of fine grooves on it and like this weird latch system. It kind of looks like this, and you have to, I don't know how to explain. If you have any dirt or any like grime, even a little too much oil, you're not gonna be able to put the muzzle device on where you need it. So what happened this one time was we were getting it reassembled. We're gonna go and fire it, make sure it works. Well, the muzzle device had a little piece of dirt that just would not let it lock in. The Kurd fired it anyway. The muzzle device goes flying. We did not shoot the muzzle device. It was like on straight. That's why we fired it, because it didn't look wrong. But the overpressure, it shot the muzzle device 30 meters into the gasoline den that we had, the little place we store our gasoline. Luckily, it didn't blow up anything, but I don't like the muzzle device. Otherwise, S tier. It's a very pleasant thing to shoot. It's reliable. That's the only one that I've not had any issues with headspace and timing, which is a whole other machine gun thing. I never had issues with extractor on it. The KPVs, every single one I used, just work flawlessly. The ZU-23, the Zeus, I don't know why they put it on a technical. I mean, it's really powerful. It's like a tank. I think that's why you bring it in to go and do that. But the funniest thing is, it's an anti-aircraft cannon. 2 of them. So you put them on the bed of this truck, and we actually had the whole system that would fit into the truck. It was made for trucks. It's like this green seat. It's 2-seater. One person sits there with the ammunition. The other is like over here. Roll it like this, and you can adjust how high, and it's freaking nuts. It's exactly what you see in the videos. To reassemble and disassemble sucks, but it's actually pretty simple if you get taught by somebody who knows what they're doing. Blindfolded, forget it. I know, it's a really pleasant weapon to shoot. The way you shoot it is like this, this rebar, and I believe we push it down. Yeah, we push it down. So like you have to push it up to rack a bullet, like to open up the chamber, and then you push it down to get it into place, and then you like push down some more, if I remember correctly, to go and fire it. The fire rate on the thing is like, oh god, it's like 2,000 rounds per minute or something. I don't know. It's something ridiculous. It fires super fast. It's impossible to shoot only one of them. Especially because there's 2 barrels. It's like, you know? When I fired it, I fired like 6 shots or something. I somehow got 3 2-round bursts. They only let you fire yak. And we're firing at this target like 2 kilometers away, 2,000 meters away on this hillside. And I hit it almost smack dab on the 3rd set of 2 rounds. There's no sighting on it. You just look down the barrel. You're like, nothing. Looks good to me. The thing is, like the splash on it's a 23. These things, massive bolts. So it's very simple to hit stuff, right? It's very accurate, very, very powerful. It's terrifying for the enemy to hear, and you can hit and damage pretty much anything on the face of the planet. I love the Zeus, and it never jammed on me either. So I'm gonna give that a solid A, just because it's very heavy. Just to carry the Namlu, the barrel. Namlu is the Kurdish word for it. You'd have to have like 2 people, or if you're really strong and you're trying to show off, you carry it with 1, but like your shoulder would be numb. Anyway, moving on to the Browning, and then the homemade rifles. The Browning was interesting. You could tell it's an American designer. First off, the metal does not look like the Russian weapons, right? The metal on it is just like this gray, fine-tuned, stamped to steel. I don't even know what stamp means, but that seems like the right word for it. It's got brackets in it. It's very well put together. The bolt assembly is like exactly what you'd expect. It's a very American system. Very, very complex. A lot of moving parts. I didn't really like it. Look, the Browning is awesome. Recoil is very, very stable, especially on the makeshift tripods we would have in our tunnels. The Dushka, a lot of times you fire it and it's boom. You know, the biggest problem we had with it was the headspace and timing. It is American technology, and unless you are very well trained in it, unless you have the special key to adjust the headspace and timing, so you fire it, boom. 1 shot goes off, oh shit, you have to rack it back. It's really tough to rack it back, and if you fail the rack it back process, you know, now you have like a double feed situation or some shit. For 25 guys, it took us like all day to get everybody through. Remember, I was with guerrillas. These guys aren't pros, but you know, you can imagine if we give this to the Iraqi army, which is probably where this came from, or if we gave it to Ukraine. a lot of these guys are not going to be able to understand how to go and use the headspace and timing unless they're trained very properly. Very American, a lot of different parts, a lot of weird things. The barrel, you have to like click, oh god, was it like 3 to 5 clicks or something? Don't quote me on that, please don't. You have to like click the barrel into place, and if you go too far, the headspace and timing is gonna be off. I don't know. It's weird machine gun jargon that you don't need to know when you use the KPV or Zeus. You just pull the trigger. When it works, it's the best machine gun. The range on it is a lot less. I don't know if it's because of the length of the barrel or the ammunition we use or whatever, but it's a lot less than the Dushka, the KPV especially, or the Zeus. But it's so accurate. I would give it an A tier. The Zeus, I would definitely give like an A. So yeah, that's all I got for the Browning. I didn't use it too much. I fired a couple bursts. I know to disassemble and reassemble blindfold. That's about it. That's about it. Going on with the last two, which I'll just briefly touch on because there's not much to say about them. The homemade rifles, the Zagros and Chia.
Oh shit! Oh, started firing the Chia.
The Zagros, if I remember, that's the Dushka variant, so it's a 12.7mm 50 caliber anti-material rifle made from a Dushka barrel. The way this thing worked was literally just a barrel, and then you would get the bolt action stuff. No spring tension or anything. You just like bring it up, push it back, put a bullet inside, put back the bolt. You have to lock it in place. If you don't do that, it'll slam back at you when you fire. But you lock it into place and you fire it. It worked. It's scary for the enemy. The idea of all these heavy weapons in the guerrilla world isn't to hit targets a lot of times. It's to scare them. If you fire one round of a 50 cal out of a Zagros or out of a Dushka or out of a, it's gonna scare the enemy. When they hear that whoosh past them in their Humvee, they're gonna freaking turn the other way. That's the idea behind it. I would say it works well for what it is. And the same goes for the Chia, which I believe is the 14.5mm KPV barrel one. It's a lot longer, a lot heavier, but that thing's sick. That was actually my last day in Syria. I got to fire it. I think it's pretty neat to use extra Dushka barrels for a different purpose. But anyway, guys, that is my talk on big machine guns. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you to all the members of the channel. Really appreciate it, boys and girls. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Thanks for listening. Peace.